Hey, welcome to the video. We're going to go over how to improve your Airbnb image today using hard data. All right, so this is going to showcase a study that was done by the Carnegie Mellon data scientists, which I'll give to you below at the bottom there. What we're going to talk about though is the outcome of that study, which took over a year. We're going to go into that. It took over 7 cities and we looked at over 500,000 photos and the changes that were in those photos that correlated with higher bookings. All right. So let that sink in. What kind of changes can you make to your photo that's going to give you higher bookings, at least according to this study? All right. So let's go into the slides right now. Let's look at it. Unfortunately, I use slides because that's just how it is. I know that it might be a little boring, but regardless, it's going to be good information that hopefully you're going to be able to take away from and apply to your own business. All right, so let's get in there. All right, now we've got the slides up. It's going to be a lot easier now to show you the examples that I'm going to provide for you in a couple slides from here. But before we go there, I need to give you a little bit of a background, right? So I have to let you understand the significance of this study, because then I think it'll really put into perspective for what the information is and how important it can be for your business. All right, so like we mentioned, this is all going to be about perfecting your Airbnb image. It was a data-driven study, right? So all of this is going to correlate to different, about 12 attributes that are extracted from this study. And what we need to know is who did the study, right? So this was done by 4 data scientists at the Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it looks over a time frame of 16 months. Okay, so 16-month long period where they looked at 13,000 listings. All right, 13,000 listings with 510 listing images. All right. And if it gets even a little wilder than that, what they looked at was 7 U.S. cities. And those cities were Boston, Los Angeles, San Diego, Seattle, Austin, New York, and San Francisco. All right. And I'm sure that if any of you are in those cities, then your ears just perked up because you really should be listening to this. And regardless, even if you're not from there, there's a lot to take away from here. All right. So let's dive right in. The factors that we need to understand right now is that there's 12 different factors, and all of those fall into about 3 different categories, areas, and in the study they call them components. All right, so that's what this slide is here all about. So we've got 3 different components. We've got the composition, color, and the figure ground relationship. So before we dive into what all of those really are, we need to understand what the attributes are inside there, right? So there's 12 different attributes, and let's just go over the first one. All right, I'm going to go through all 12 of them, and we're going to see exactly where those 12 attributes fall inside of these 3 main areas, these 3 components and stuff like that, right? So the first one is composition. All right, so and that's talking about diagonal dominance, and I am also not a professional photographer, so this is just my understanding of it. So hopefully I'm just laying it out in as best of layman terms as possible. All right, so diagonal dominance to me is when you're looking at the image. The example that I provided there for you is that you can see the image without diagonal dominance is, well, just things aren't quite aligned and centered as they can be, especially if you were to think about how if you were to create a X on the image, which I'm going to show you right now, if we put an X there, just like kind of like the icon that you'd see for the mail symbol, as in the, like the letters, the mail that you'd receive in your inbox and stuff like that, your email. It's that kind of logo where you have those X's in the middle, and that kind of looks like an envelope, right? And that's what it represents. So to me, that's what diagonal dominance is, right? So when you draw that X inside of there, you can really see how the diagonals for that image start to kind of position themselves very nicely. And that's what the diagonal dominance is all about for this attribute, for better Airbnb image. All right, so let's move on to the second attribute. The second attribute is the rule of thirds. All right, the rule of thirds is just simply dividing the image into 9 different spaces. So about 2 two lines in the two lines vertically and then two lines horizontally, and that gives you the composition of 9 different squares. All right, so you've got 9 different squares there, and as you can see in that image, it's very clear to us which image looks better once we have that rule of thirds in there. And you can kind of see too, if you look at the image that follows the rule of thirds, we can see that the one in the middle there, that kind of showcases the distance of the room, so how much depth that room really has. But then it's also showing you that the bed and the couch, which is on the left and the right, are perfectly sitting on those lines as well. So you want your images to line up in that rule of thirds, that rule. All right, so let's move on to the third and the fourth. All right, so these ones are put together. It's the visual balance of intensity and also of color. All right, so those things work together, and as you can see in this example, we've got one without visual balance, and then we've also got the image with visual balance. And you can kind of see here that the image that follows the visual balance, it's not only following the intensity and also the color, which is laid out quite evenly here, but it's also following, the rule of thirds and making everything very centered. All right. So that's the visual balance. And next we've got number 5, we've got hue. All right, and the hue is it's the RGB. So if you hear that, it's always red, green, and blue, and those things affect what they say is your emotional arousal. All right, so something that has a cool color, which is the purple and blue, as you can see on the left, that's kind of gives you the relaxing type of feelings. And then if you want something that's exciting, what you want to do is you want to add a little bit more red and yellow. And what's great about this attribute, the hue attribute, is it's something that you can control almost in any photography program or on your phone, that you can just add as a post effect afterwards. All right, so let's move on to number 6. We've got saturation. All right, so saturation is how rich the image color is. All right, so I forgot to also mention that we've moved into the color component here, right? So inside of the color component, you've got saturation. And again, it's how rich the color is of the image. So highly saturated image is what equates to more colorfulness, and essentially is what they view as better. All right. So moving on, we've got brightness and contrast. All right. And brightness and contrast is how the image essentially translates into the mind of the potential guest. And when you add an increase of brightness and an increase of the contrast of brightness, you can see that the illumination is quite evenly spread from the one that has low illumination versus the one that has a high illumination, right? So things are just it's just easier for someone to actually see around the room, to inspect whether or not when they get there it's going to actually look like that. So that's what the 7th and 8th attribute is about. It's all about having an evenly spread illumination. All right, now let's move on to number 9. We're really whizzing through this kind of stuff, right? So I'm glad that hopefully it's not boring you guys. So number 9, we've got image clarity. There's not really too much for me to say for this one, except for the fact that I am absolutely positively sure that each one of us has looked around at our competitors, and we've seen somebody who most likely has probably a newer listing that they just kind of threw up there, and you can see that they've got a very dark image that's it's just, at least in this definition, is not clear. So the color is dull versus the image that has lots of clarity, which has a very clear color in it. All right, so this one is going to be very apparent, and I think it's I think later on we're going to talk about how these different attributes qualify for getting more bookings in terms of days and even dollars. So just bear with me, but keep in mind how important a lot of these attributes are, right? So moving on, let's go on to the figure-ground relationship. And this is where we talk about the 10th, 11th, and 12th. They're all kind of packed together, and it's all about the difference in area, color, and texture. And I know that sounds kind of it's not that clear, but what the figure ground relationship is the difference between what is in the background and whatever is in the focal part of the image, and whether you can tell, or sorry, whether a guest can tell that there's something different there. All right, so let's go over into these examples. It's easier for me to go into, let's say, if we look at the unclear separation from figure and ground, is that we can see the one with the, I believe those are bunk beds there. We've got a wooden bunk bed set along with wooden walls. All right. So it's very hard to separate those two things from each other. And that's what's not clear. And that's what the whole point about figure ground relationship and having a clear separation of that is, right? So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of it. If you just look around, you kind of see the best one to see, I think, is the one with the beige bed there. It's got the beige bed and the white background. It's very slightly dark, but it's quite nice, you know. It's a lot better than the ones that are unclear, just because we can't really see the depth of the room. All right, so a lot of these attributes do have a lot about creating depth, but what we're putting onto those things that are in our head is actual assignments of things that we can twist and turn, right? So let's go in and let's talk about the booking results, right? So now we know about these 12 different attributes, which are mostly commonly known in the photography space. But what happens when, let's say, we adjust when we adjust the diagonal dominance a little bit, or what happens when we adjust the brightness of an image, right? What is that going to correlate? So when we look at this study here that was done by these data scientists, we've got this chart. All right, so just have a look at this chart. Just give it a little, give it a little bit of time. You know, let it absorb into your brain. So what we can see is that we've got the components on the left hand side, where we got the three components: composition, color, and the figure ground relationship. And then we've got those individual attributes there. All right. So what I'm going to explain to you is how these different attributes equated to dollars and also the amount of days that were booked. All right, and let's talk about the ones that had the biggest effect, because I think those ones are going to be very important for you, because instead of well, it's kind of the 80-20, right? So what can we do that's going to give us a very big lift by doing almost the least amount of work, all right? The first one is the diagonal dominance. So in the study, they found that with an improvement of 1 standard deviation, all right? So a standard deviation is, if you ever see the bell curve, then basically there's the middle is the 0 standard deviation. If you go 1 to the right, then essentially it's just kind of it's a little bit difficult for me to explain, to be honest with you, but it's basically one incremental adjustment in terms of positivity. All right, so in the study, what they found was that with 1 standard deviation, 1 positive standard deviation, they found that $851.14 per year was made by Airbnb hosts, which equated to 5 days extra. And I think that for most of us, it would make sense for us to look at this study and look at more of the days extra versus the per year, because the per year in the study was taken with about $187.30 per night. That was the nightly rate that the listings were calculated at for this, because that's what the data scientists looked at in terms of the average rate. So it was about $187.30. But that may not be your rate, but you can still look at the numbers, the number of days, and that's going to be more significant for all of us in general, right? So with diagonal dominance, there was at least 5 days extra in which there were more bookings that came through from just an incremental improvement in diagonal dominance. All right, so the next one is the rule of thirds. This one also had a huge influential factor for attributing to a better image. And with that, there was $609.13 per year added extra, and 3 extra days of Airbnb bookings. All right, so that was another influential factor, was the rule of thirds. And then we've also got image clarity, and with image clarity, there were 13 days extra of bookings. All right, and that's why I kind of stopped on this slide earlier, is because it was really, really important, right? So if your image looks like the one that is dull there, that is very dark, dark, do yourself a favor, improve it, just add that extra bit of color. And at least in this study, what they found is it added 13 extra days of bookings that equated about $2,300 dollars in extra bookings for the year. All right, and then we've also got contrast of brightness. All right, so that's what was what the evenly spread brightness that sorry, not evenly spread brightness, evenly spread illumination of the image. All right, so just making things clearer so that when people look at the image, they can say, oh, okay, so this is how this place will look like when I get there, because we're gonna put down a lot of money to either take our families there or, you know, book it for whatever reason, and we need to make sure that it is the same as when we look at the image. It just adds a little bit of more trust, right? And for this one, it added 10 extra days for brightness. All right, so that's something that we should be paying attention to. But the most important thing and kind of the most intriguing aspect of this entire study, which I kind of left here for the end, is that what they found was that verified images, which were taken by photographers hired by Airbnb, those ones gave the highest amount of revenue booked for days booked and stuff like that. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it just happens to be that the Airbnb photographers are trained in a way in which these attributes, these 12 attributes that we just went over, these guys can, well, number one, they're very good because they're professional photographers and they zero in on this stuff, because for photographers, this is easy, right? This is kind of what they're trained to do. For people like perhaps, well, mostly like me, I don't know about yourself, but you know, it's not exactly common knowledge, these 12 attributes, right? So that's why this study is very, very important for the majority of us who aren't professional photographers. And what they found, at least in this study, is that the verified images, when somebody had a poor image and then they went straight to a verified image, which was where Airbnb takes photos of your listings and then uploads them in the system, and then you get this little small verified image text basically at the bottom of your images, then yeah, that's the verified image, and that's what they found gave the biggest lift. So it's not impossible for you to achieve this without an Airbnb photographer, because it's simply that Airbnb just doesn't have that many photographers to take photos of every listing, and sometimes you want to hire your own professional photographer because it's your friend or whatever. You just know that they're good, right? It's just going to be the fact that you are not going to have that verified image text next to your photos. But regardless, if you can ask them to hone in on these specific attributes, well, at least based on this case study, that or sorry, not case study, at least based on this study, then then you're going to get a lift in your bookings. All right, so that is what I would say is going to give you some food for thought. All right, so if you're going to be as happy as this kid, just going around taking some pictures at this point, then hopefully I've helped you out here. I've also put together something very special. I've included some example photos. So all of the examples that I showed you with diagonal dominance and brightness and all those examples, they're going to be available in a download below. And I've also gone, and since at Remote Scale, we look at tons and tons and tons of Airbnb listings, specifically the ones that are competing in the search results and stuff like that. That's the stuff that we care about, is how this stuff affects your search ranking, so that you can get more views, get more bookings, get more traffic, essentially get more, improve your booking rate for your Airbnb. And that's how we are using these types of these 12 attributes to improve our own bookings, and then also the ones of our clients as well. So just click below, click the I've just got the download available for you guys. Hopefully this helped you out. I'm as you can tell, I've been very excited about putting this one together for you guys, and I will chat with you soon.